Hello guys, my name is Anna and I'm from Ukraine, and I have decided I will vlog daily from my country Ukraine since the start of this awful war with Russia. And today it is a year of vlogging, and if you're new to the channel, please subscribe because I believe the world needs to know more about Ukraine. And today I'm going to speak on one of my favorite topics globally, and that is the collapse of Russian Federation. The person who gave me this idea was actually the so-called president of Russia, Vladimir Putin. And I rarely listen to his interviews because I think doctors should, and the tribunal in Hague. But not me, Ukrainian citizen, because there is nothing new he can tell me or frighten me with. We are not afraid and we are going to win this war. But he started talking about the collapse of Russia and the disappearance of Russian people. And that is an interesting topic. Plus, I think it's really important that he started talking about them because maybe that's likely. Honestly, when you ask me how do I see the victory of Ukraine, and that is the collapse of modern day Putin's Russia and Russian Federation in its present format. I don't know why global politicians are so much afraid to touch this topic, because after a year of full-scale war, after so many threats to countries and global security system, Putin must be punished, and Russian society is also responsible for all what he does, because one person cannot control 140 million of people. It goes without saying. And I know that many of you watching soft propaganda channels like to believe that Russians are just afraid to say what they think, but believe me, knowing many Russians closer than you, I know that many of them do support him, do like everything what is done here in Ukraine, and I guess I will have to record a separate video on how to spot good Russians if they exist. So, coming back to our topic, and that is the collapse of Russian Federation and loss of Russian cultural identity. Putin's words prove what I am 100% convinced of based on history, based on analysis, and so on. His vision and understanding of Ruski Mir and people who are Russians is totally wrong. It is a construct that, when checked by reality, will definitely fail. Because the way Putin sees Russian people is totally like Nazi style or something, repeating Hitler's doctrine of one people. Russia is a federation, and it consists of many different peoples and nationalities that are super suppressed in country. That is totally artificial. Russia is too big, but the problem is not the territory. The problem, it is very diverse, but this diversity is not taken as strengths. And on contrary, the policy of Russification is spread all over state, regional, and other official departments, educational, cultural, and so on. Cultural minorities, indigenous peoples do not have rights at all. Many of them speak about that, but they don't have much opportunities. Some of them commit suicide publicly to attract the attention of the global world, but you all know how difficult it is to attract attention against Russia, how difficult it was, for example, before the start of this war in Ukraine. Many people did not believe us or chose not like to dig deep into Ukrainian-Russian relations to avoid a very popular word, escalation. So many indigenous peoples, many cultures are now suffering in Russia. And I have opened a Wikipedia page just to count the number of nationalities that live on the territory of Russia and do not have their own countries because they were occupied by Soviet Union or later by Russia, and there are dozens, literally. I have decided not to put down that, but even I can tell you about Bashkiri, Buryati, Mordva, Udmurti, Yakuti, Chuvashi, what else, like many, and there are dozens of them who are not allowed to practice their language, practice their culture. It is all treated as Nazism in Russia. If you want to preserve your cultural heritage, or you say that Ukraine is an independent country, or Tatarstan is an independent country, or something like that. So the collapse of Russia is not something unbelievable. This is not a strong and united country. This is a country kept by terror and old traditions and the myth of the empire that Putin now tries to revive. His empire was impossible without Ukraine. So maybe by losing Ukraine forever, this will give an inspiration to all of these nations to seek for their independence. I know that people say, who will have Russian nuclear powers then? Nuclear weapons. But come on, now Russia is united. Putin has control over nuclear weapons. Are you satisfied? Do you feel safe? So why asking questions and predicting the future if our present is really bad? And in general, if you look at this possible collapse, there will be lots of countries, and Putin said, like, we will have Moscowites. Exactly, because Russia is a pretty new name acquired by the country. For centuries, it was known as a Moscow Tsardom. And even Peter the Great was the Tsar of Moscovia. So this classical Russia, what you understand as Russia, like drinking vodka, horses, wearing fur hats, this will be perhaps Moscow and cities around it. Then St. Petersburg is very likely to proclaim itself a different culture. They often speak about that. They often underline how different they are from the rest of Russia. Then, of course, we have peoples in the Urals and peoples in Caucasus Mountains. They are totally different, practicing different culture, food, family life, like religions. And they try even not to mingle, not to assimilate with Russians. Also, there are peoples of Karelia. There are people, there is a huge country of Tatarstan that joined the Russian Federation in 1994. And Yakutia, that I have already mentioned, many republics that can appear on the far east of Russia. All of them are very different from this classical image of a Russian person. All of them have their own languages, sometimes of a totally different linguistic family. Different religions are practiced, started from Islam and finishing with Buddhism. They have different histories, national epos, and so on. And they are suppressed. They are not allowed to practice these cultures, to pass them from generation to generation. Any cultural like education is in Russia that is allowed for other cultures is like dancing. And that's it. So all you can do is learn the Russified version of your national dance. But no support for languages, like Russian dominates everywhere. No national, come on, there are lots of Ukrainians in Russia, millions of them. And there is not a single Ukrainian club or Ukrainian library. They were searched, they were closed for decades before the start of full-scale Russian war in Ukraine. So technically, there is no Ukrainian cultural organizations on the territory of Russia. So there is no Ukrainians. And I think that the fact that Putin speaks about that is that in reality, he or many people who create the ideology of Ruski Mir really well understand that Russia is an artificial construct, modern Russia, that it is a dying empire that will sooner or later fall apart. And my task, the task of many Ukrainians, your task, if you agree with me, is to make people visualize this world with a different Russia, with a Russia that falls apart and many new beautiful countries appear. These countries will also inherit the natural resources one owned by this evil empire. You will be able to negotiate gas prices, you will be able to eat caviar or to travel to some snowy lands. But this will be, for example, people of Siberia, who often in various surveys characterize themselves as Sibiraki nationality, not Russian, but Siberian. And they are different. By the way, lots of people, Ukrainian people, were deported to Siberia during the 20th century, and they did change this culture, Russian culture. And many Siberians are treated as like very hospitable people who have gardens, orchards, and like working much more than classical Russians. So the fact that Putin speaks about that means that we have to talk more about that. And I know that, for example, on a recent Munich conference, they were having a panel with invited Russian oppositioners, and they were trying to visualize future democratic Russia. So I think that future democratic Russia is only possible after some transformations, including geographical and border transformation inside Putin's empire, and the appearance of new states and countries that will reflect the cultural identities of the people to whom they actually belong. What is also bad, that today's war in Ukraine, Putin also uses to clean, just like Hitler, his own society. And the majority of people mobilized come from various national republics, like Buryati. They are not like they were, for example, Buryati were responsible for many crimes committed in Bucha, and they are totally not Russian. They practice very different culture. And that's the way Putin cleans his Russian empire from cultural minorities and indigenous peoples. Something similar Stalin did when he was sending Ukrainian troops during the Second World War to the most complicated hot zones. And he was even quoted, he said, like, it's good if more of them will die during this war. We will have to send less of them to prisons and camps later. So this is something that Putin repeats right now. You see that mobilization processes do not take place in big cities, but just in small, depressive republics. And I see that the collapse of Russia will be a true victory for the world. And the construction of new democratic societies will be actually a sign of liberation of Russian people, Udmurt people, of Yakuti, of Siberians, and many, many other beautiful countries. On my community tab, I still have voting. What do you think the collapse of Russia will mean? Something good and positive for the world, or something dangerous that we have to avoid? Please let me know what you think. Thank you so much for watching, for buying me coffees and becoming my patrons, and thus inspiring my new projects. If you like this video and the idea of Russian collapse, as do I, please share and make more people at least think on this possible alternative future and perhaps the only way to that democratic Russia. If you're new to the channel and you like what I'm saying and you agree that the world needs to know more about Ukraine, do subscribe. And thank you for your support of my country, Ukraine. Slava Ukraini!